So welcome everybody to SDI's part 2, What's the Meaning of Machining, with SDI instructor Mark Lynn. Mark is not only one of our amazing instructors, he is also a gunsmith, a blacksmith, a machinist, a pilot. You own an aviation company, you're a writer, you're a super cool dude. So great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you again, Vanessa and Brian. I appreciate it.
Of course. And if you don't know Brian, that is Brian. He's awesome too. We're just not here to talk about him or me. So if you guys did not see What's the Meaning of Machining part 1, we might touch on some things in this webinar that you're not familiar with. Chances are we probably talked about them in last month's webinar, so make sure to go to our YouTube page and look for part 1 of that. You can also find it on our Facebook and Instagram pages. And that's just SDI School, or search Sonoran Desert Institute.
Actually, off topic real quick too, Vanessa, real quick, are you familiar with Joey? I forget his last name, but he's doing the SDI podcast.
Oh, Joey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can
awesome.
Can you remember what his last name was?
Upper.
Upway or Upman or something like that?
Upper, yeah.
Upper, that's it, yep.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we may join a few of those podcasts as well at some point. So
awesome.
I was listening to him earlier today, the gun rack. It sounded really pretty cool. So a lot of good stuff on there.
Yeah, I don't know if we have actually released that yet, but be on the lookout for it. I hear wonderful things, but yeah, I don't think anybody can find that just yet. But way to go ahead and talk about something that we can't direct him to yet. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that should be out there pretty soon. But if you weren't in here already when I was saying it, make sure if you have questions for Mark, go to that Q&A at the bottom, submit those. But I think we try to touch very briefly on some of the stuff we talked about last time, so we can get into some of these more advanced conversations. But Mark, do you want to do a quick briefing on some of the things you went over last week or last month?
Yeah, we kind of talked about the curriculum here at SDI, kind of some of the topics we did cover, kind of some of the teaching style, kind of what the general idea, how do we teach, how do we convey machining, via online, kind of touched on that a little bit. Did kind of a shop tour, showed some of my machines here in the shop. So yeah, I don't think I forgot too much.
And talked about a lot of the things that somebody might not think about if they are starting their machining shop at home. Sure. A lot of great information there for anybody that is considering doing that. I definitely recommend checking out that webinar beforehand. And I guess if we do have any questions, I'll start there. Nope. We already got people asking for Mark's info, so we'll put that out. Yeah.
You can get me too at I'm also on Instagram. I don't know if that's on there as well, Vanessa, but MAL2516 is Instagram there. And right. I post just a plethora of different things, anything from aviation, working on airplanes, flying airplanes, to machining, gunsmithing, and all sorts of stuff on there.
Awesome. All right. So what is your most rewarding experience as a machinist?
Every time I go to a machine and I produce a part that is usable in some fashion.
Yeah.
Can I get any broader than that?
I think so, but no, you did great. Yeah. And what's the most difficult skill to master that you have mastered?
Oh, does it have to be machining related?
Well, it was going to be, but what were you going to say?
I was going to say sheet metal forming and shaping.
Oh, yeah. That counts. Well, what about that? I mean, not that I'm a master, but what about that for you was hard, and how did you overcome it?
Basically just learning the different techniques, and in terms of sheet metal forming, you've got shrink and stretch and things of that nature, just learning how to control it and learning how to read different shapes to see what, whether you're stretching or you're shrinking, kind of thing. So
that's what I was going to say.
Sure.
What's probably the biggest mistake or error that you've seen somebody make in a shop, and how could that have been avoided?
Complacency in terms of safety. Wearing inappropriate clothing or wearing gloves when we shouldn't be wearing gloves. Sometimes, you get some very detrimental results, and you lose body parts and things of that nature, or you're maimed to the point where you can't use certain body parts. So I can't stress safety enough.
Yeah. Have you ever seen anything like that happen?
I sure have.
Oh.
I've seen fingers come off, where people wearing gloves in a drill press. They get the gloves caught up in the drill press, and their fingers come off like they're Legos.
Oh. Well, that is gross. Don't do that.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty gnarly accidents in the machine shop. So inherently a dangerous environment. So we definitely need to make sure we're paying attention to safety.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would like to stress to anybody who is a machinist or wants to be is try not to lose body parts.
That's true. So one question that Chris brought up for me, or had prepared for me today too, Vanessa, so kind of get it kicked off that way as well. So what is actually, if you give me just 1 second, I want to read it. Let's take a look here.
I believe I have it as well, if I can get it sooner.
So can I mention the individual's name that asked the question?
Of course.
Okay. So Matthew Harris emailed a question. What do you think is a good setup for a beginner? And the best setup I can think for a beginner, this is, again, it's going to sound so broad, it's going to sound so probably just very broad, is a setup that you can afford but you can use. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether you have this particular brand or that particular machine, or I have this amount of space, or I don't have that. It's whatever you can afford to get, or borrow, or steal, or whatever you can to get your hands on the machines and start learning and start creating. That's the best setup for a beginner.
So if somebody had an allotted amount of money that they wanted to spend to set up their machine shop, would you recommend that spend more money on these machines and these tools that are going to last you longer, but you might not have everything that you need? You might have to borrow some others or go somewhere else. Or would you recommend get all of the basics, but you might need to rebuy them in a couple years?
Bingo. That's exactly what I would recommend.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because, you can always swap out a poor brand or a poor, a machine that's inferior in terms of quality. You can always swap that machine out. You can always get something bigger and larger and better. And, there's always going to be that option out there.
Yeah.
Get the machines and get on them. Get learning, get practicing, get making things.
For sure.
Does that make sense? I hope I answered that question properly.
No, 100%. Definitely.
And I didn't want it to be rhetorical, but, or too broad in spectrum, but that's really my opinion.
Do I know what rhetorical means? That's one of my favorite quotes. Sorry. So we had a couple of questions. Christopher Jackson asked, can a mill or a lathe be too big to make smaller parts?
Absolutely no. Absolutely not. No, because I have, in this particular, my home shop that I'm sitting in currently, I've got a 1560 Nardini lathe, meaning it's 15 inches in diameter. So I can swing a 15-inch diameter part. And I can machine anything in the bed that's 60 inches long. But what it doesn't prevent me from doing is machining something that is 1 inch in diameter and 2 inches in length. Right? Does that make any sense?
Right. Yeah.
So if I have a larger machine, I can always use it for smaller items to machine or smaller parts to machine. If I have a small machine, I can't machine larger parts on that smaller machine. I hope that makes sense.
Definitely. Makes total sense. And talking back about the safety, losing body parts and things like that, Philip asked, what about framer's gloves or fingerless gloves?
I recommend that you do not wear gloves in and around spinning spindles, such as, you know, drill presses and lathes and that kind of thing.
Awesome. Jeff asks, so your basic mini mills and mini lathes are fine to start learning?
Absolutely, they are.
Easy enough.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. When I used to be a stonemason, and when I first started, I needed tools, and I could not afford the $300 DeWalt grinders and cutters, and so I would go to Harbor Freight, get one job done, make my money from that, and then I'd purchase and step up to buy the next better product as I could afford it.
Absolutely, Brian. I couldn't agree with that more. It's like your education here at SDI, right? So you're investing some money for an ROI or a return on investment of that education. Same thing for a machine. You're going to buy them paralyzed or crippled because you can't afford the biggest, the best, the baddest machine, right? When you could start with something maybe a little less expensive or something a little smaller or whatever, what have you, to maybe get into that, make a few parts, make a few bucks, reinvest that money into a better or larger equipment, just like you said, Brian.
If I couldn't afford the expensive stuff, I wouldn't be doing the work at all. You might as well get something that you can get something done with, make that money, and like you said, reinvest that money back in your business.
And can't we agree, Brian, that, you know, really when you take care of your equipment, you know, you clean it, you oil it, you maintain it, you can get pretty good tool life out of most pieces of equipment anymore.
Oh, absolutely. Unless you're running it like 24/7 and, you know,
yep,
you're running that motor or whatever it is constantly, yep, you're going to have natural wear and tear anyway. They just may not last as long, but they get the cuts that you need. And at the end of the day, you make that money that otherwise you couldn't if you didn't have the equipment.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Now, what types of routine maintenance do you need to do on most of your machines?
Generally, it's not too much. I mean, you know, my lathe, I try to change the gear, the head gear oil once a year, typically. You know, just maintaining ways, the bed ways of the machine, making sure that especially grit like from sanding and grinding and things is really hard on these bed ways. Making sure that you either cover it up or clean it out real well. Oiling the ways in the mill. It has a one-shot loop system on the mill. On the mill, adjusting the gibs. Just general overall maintenance. You know, greasing. You know, making sure belts are tight, making sure things are lubed. You know, just like your, you know, basically like your vehicle. Right. I don't spend a ton of time. I mean, I have PMs that I do on all these machines. All these machines are extremely old, so, you know, they're worn in pretty well. And again, they kind of get grumpy and they kind of get ornery, but, you know, really with some general maintenance, I mean, they last forever. And like my vertical bandsaw, my do-all over here, I mean, it's going to come down here for a major overhaul here this winter. Going through all the transmission and the gearbox and the welder and everything else on it. But, you know, and these machines, again, I have old surplus machines, and I buy these machines for a reason. And I do buy them understanding that they will need major overhaul at some point.
That was actually a question I was going to ask you last time, but we didn't have time. What do you recommend? Do you like auctions or places like that to find old used equipment, or just searching online, or any idea of that?
There's a lot of like home shop or home machine shop on Facebook. Facebook Marketplace is really turning out to be a good location. There's several machinery dealers that deal in new and used surplus machines. There's Craigslist. There's just a plethora of different places to find them. Very good question, O'Brien.
Yep.
And, you know, I mean, like the mill behind me here, the Bridgeport, you know, I mean, these things, man, $5,000 is what this machine is probably worth. The digital readout of the machine is about $1,400. So, you know, these things don't, you know, they're not necessarily cheap. So would a benchtop mini mill work? Absolutely would work. You know, if you can buy one for $800 or $1,000, it's going to serve you just fine. Take care of it.
Awesome. We've got a couple of questions rolling in here. Oh, and you just covered one of them. Would you suggest getting into CNC machines early or wait?
I would wait. If you're gonna be truly doing gunsmith work, you're gonna be doing one-off parts. You're not gonna be doing setups for, you know, production runs. If you're gonna go into business, and let's just say you're going into business and making, you know, a particular muzzle brake that you've designed and it's a hot seller, well, then obviously go to a CNC machine. You're gonna run thousands of them at a time. But to do true gunsmith work, we're only making 1 or 2 pieces at a time. A firing pin, we're only making 1 firing pin, you know, per firearm, you know, or we may be only making, you know, whatever particular widget, but you're only making 1 or 2 of them. You're not making thousands of them. Does that mean that you shouldn't learn CAD CAM and CNC? Absolutely not. I run Fusion 360. It's a CAD CAM. I can take that once I draw it, I can program it, and I can take that same and post it to the machine. So it doesn't mean that I don't recommend that you learn that facet of it, but as a true gunsmith, you're only making onesie twosies. You're not making thousands. Again, unless you're going into business making muzzle brakes, let's say, now you're making thousands of them. So.
For sure. And what is your take on a drill mill combo? Worth it or better to get them separate?
My opinion would be to get them separate. It's like the variable or the all-in-one welders nowadays. You can buy a MIG welder that can do TIG, and it can do MIG and TIG, and, you know, and obviously arc or stick. You know, my opinion is it can do all those things, but it doesn't do any one of those things very good.
Gotcha.
But again, if that's what you have access to, or that's what you can find, or that's what you can afford, I wouldn't hold back. I'd buy it.
Now, what is the most crucial thing that you can tell any future smiths?
Learn, learn, learn. Get with a good group of mentors that are better than yourself. Shut your mouth, open your ears, open your eyes, and go from their head into your head.
Perfect.
I still do that. I have a group of folks that I go to. I mean, the guys that I go to that when I don't know everything, and I have questions that absolutely get a group of smiths, or get a group of smiths and machinists and welders. I mean, get into it, dive into it, and learn everything you can about it.
And what are the main characteristics that make a great machinist?
Somebody that is not cocky, somebody that is humble, somebody that is willing to teach, somebody that is willing to learn. And I would say somebody's lifetime of learning is I can't, it's immeasurable. I cannot stress that enough. We're always in this field. We're always learning. We're never know-it-alls. I mean, every day, you know, Gene Winfield, a famous car fabrication gentleman from years and years ago, you know, his quote to this day, I think Gene's in his upper 80s. He says, every day is a school day. And I tell that to my kids. Same thing. You're always learning.
It's wonderful. I like that. Let's see here. Brian, you got any?
Be hungry for knowledge. Be searching, be seeking, be asking, and yeah, I mean, just constantly be hungry for the material and for the knowledge. I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, we got a question that caught my attention from Bradley Rudy. When cutting a barrel on a lathe, do you recommend a 3 or 4 jaw chuck or a collet?
4 jaw chuck for most barrel work on a lathe, because you can indicate, I typically use a spider on the outboard side of it, and you can do more finite adjustments, and you can indicate everything in that way. Would a 3 jaw chuck work? Absolutely, it'll work. Is a 4 jaw chuck better and more accurate? Yes, it is.
On a budget, would you recommend a lathe or a mill to start with?
Whatever you can afford. If that means if If it's $500 for the mill and it's $900 for the lathe, then buy the mill first. Vice versa, you know, either way.
Awesome. Any benefits to a gunsmithing lathe rather than a typical lathe? Other
I
than,
don't, you know, Vanessa, from what I'm seeing on, you know, the Grizzly line, I've been digging into that a little bit more because a lot of my students come back with, you know, there's a few research things that we ask them to do in class. A lot of them are coming back with this Grizzly gunsmithing lathe. I don't have any personal hands-on experience with it, but from what I'm seeing, the research that I'm doing, it looks like a very fine lathe, and it's set up very, very intuitive for a gunsmith. Again, very, you know, the way the headstock's set up, you can set the outboard side up for, you know, spiders and indicating things in. The Grizzly, I mean, right now, the Grizzly looks like a great gunsmith lathe.
awesome.
Much better than this Nardini that I have, because I've got to disassemble half of the back end of this machine to get set up. I got to change gears. I got to do all kinds of stuff in the machine to do barrel work. And it's like painting a car or an airplane. You know, it's 95% setup and preparation, and it's only 5% the actual doing the task.
So if you can alleviate that and take that out of the equation.
Yeah. And with this Grizzly line that's going on, this true gunsmithing lathe, the owner of the company is a gunsmith as well, from what I can gather, and they have designed and set a lot of these gunsmith lathes up to where they're very intuitive. So I would highly recommend checking those out.
Awesome. We actually have Brian says, I'm actually in Mark's class this semester at SDI. I was wondering
Brian,
what.
How are you?
I was wondering what types of hands-on machining training or classes you would recommend. The only machining experience I have was junior high school wood shop.
I got to hand it to you all of my current, my former, and my future students that come into this class, and they have either never ran a mill or a lathe, or it's been like Brian here, where it's been years ago. I got to hand it to them. Man, it's a lot of learning going on and a lot of thinking going on, you know, to do this. But to get to his question, generally you have a local community college or a VOTech community, you know, VOTech school, you know, that'll offer a basic machining class or a basic intermediate machining class. Worst case scenario, if you can't find something of that nature, then go to Harbor Freight, go somewhere and buy yourself a mill and a lathe. And there's a lot of good YouTube instruction out there too. You know, that would be the last resort, I guess. But by all means, look at a local community college, VOTech school. But don't let that cripple you or stop you. I mean, if you're really hungry to learn this, email me. I'll walk people through, my students. I'll walk them through it. I'll help them out to whatever I can do. And then, you know, get on YouTube and check things out there.
That's a question I'd have to kind of follow up on that. Out of all the time you've been teaching this class for SDI, what do you think's been the biggest challenge for your students?
That's a good question, Brian. The concepts. Understanding the concepts. You know, when you're at a lathe, when you're turning handles and knobs and you're seeing things hands-on, it's so much easier than just when I'm explaining how an edge finder works on a mill. It's so abstract, or it can be abstract, because especially, like I just prefaced a little while ago, to my students or my former students or my future students that have never operated a lathe, have never really been close to a lathe or a mill, you know, it's a lot of mental thought and a lot of, you know, again, YouTube and a lot of extracurricular that you have to do in order to fully comprehend it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
What possibilities?
This is not an easy topic. I mean, machining is not something that's easy to just say, hey, you know what, this is this is that, and there you go. There's so many different fundamentals that you have to learn to build up to become a good machinist. So going back to the question, what makes a good machinist? That's why I say always learning, always willing to learn, and very humble, because it'll make you very humble. If you don't know, don't play that you do.
And what possibilities are there for somebody who learns these concepts aside from gunsmithing?
Oh man, there's tons. I mean, they're crying right now for most all trades. I mean, go try to find a plumber or an electrician or a machinist or anything else. I mean, if you learn the machining trade and you get really good at it, I mean, go into mold work, go into die work, go into general machining, start your own business. I mean, you're always needing a machinist, always.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure everything you touch, either a machinist touched it first or he made a machine that made it. Yeah.
That's right.
That's pretty impressive.
Yep. And I mean, there's always work for a good job shop machinist. He'll always have a job. Always. I get it all the time here. I mean, people say, hey, you know what? This broke. Can you fix this for me? Yeah, absolutely I can. I've got welders, I've got machining, I've got everything here at the house. I was just working on a pump at my house not too long ago. I had to make a sleeve, so here I'm taking some mild steel, boring it out, cutting threads on it, and here we are. I mean, we're making a part. So
that's super cool. Do you think there would be a benefit to taking an intro to machining before attending SDI and taking your course?
Absolutely, there would be. And I think it would be advantageous to take a follow-up that same class after you've taken my class here at SDI. Absolutely, I do.
But you think if somebody hadn't taken it, knowing how you are as an instructor and what you teach, they'd be fine without it as well? Absolutely,
they would. Because I take all that into consideration. When I'm grading papers, it's hard for me to. This is not like an English class. It's not like a math class where there's really a right and a wrong. You're teaching concepts and you're trying to get students to think about how is that student learning? Are they grasping the basic concept? They may not have all the terminology. They may not have all the components together. Are they grasping the concept? So when I grade, I'm a hard grader. Yeah, it's not like this is just an easy, get through my class 100%, no problem.
Right.
But I have to take all that into consideration. I want my students to learn. If they don't learn, I have not done my job, whether they get an F or they get an A. It doesn't matter. If I have not done my job, they have not learned, I have failed.
Makes sense. Michael asks, do we need to have taken a trigonometry course to be able to look at a part and figure out the steps needed to make it?
The more math, the better.
I have never said that in my life, ever.
I do math. I mean, so I'm building an airplane, a real life airplane here in my shop. And so it was built via plans. There's building it via plans. And I actually have my kids working out with me. My son's 12, my daughter's 11. To me, in my house, it's very important that that I expose my children to a lot of things. I'm a pilot. Doesn't mean that I want them to be pilots. No. But I want to expose them to it because I want that to go on their resume, or I want them to have experience with this stuff to be a better or a more well-rounded adult individual, so on and so forth. When you roll out the plans in terms of building this airplane, it doesn't give you step one, do this, step two, do that. Here's a box of parts. You rivet things together, you bolt things together. No. No, it gives you dimensions, and there's a lot of missing dimensions that you have to go find. So there's a lot of trigonometry, there's a lot of math, there's a lot of arithmetic, there's a lot of, just all kinds of math. So
and
absolutely.
Basic math, like fractions.
Well, yeah, but it goes more than that, because there again, you're finding angles, you're finding distances. You've got to calculate all that. It doesn't give you that information, so you have to go find out what it is. Mm-hmm. So man, get boned up into math for sure.
4 out of 3 people are bad at math. That's
crazy.
No, it's 3 out of 4. I'm just kidding. 4 out of 3. It was a joke. Moving on.
Yeah.
John says, one thing I have found is not everyone can do this type of work. I used to be in the steel fab business for 20 years, but due to illness, I'm taking this up. Has he come across any of those who just can't do it like I have?
Absolutely.
People that can't do math?
There's, it's just like this, right? So as we were talking about the trades, and, I don't want to take anything away from doctors, and I don't want to take anything away from lawyers, but let's say this. Can everybody be a doctor? Does everybody have the wherewithal to be a doctor? Okay, so not everybody has the wherewithal to be a machinist. And so when I hear things like, oh, you're just a machinist, or oh, you're just in the shop, or oh, you're just a welder, or you're just a pilot, or you're just a this, or you're just a that, I don't agree with that, okay? Because there's certain skill sets that certain people have that can do it. There's certain skill sets that people don't have that make them wash out. And I've had a lot of people that have washed out, not in SDI, not at SDI, not in our coursework here at SDI, but I have, worked with individuals that just don't get it.
That makes sense. And since we were just talking about lawyers, I think this is a great segue. Mark spent a couple of years with a master pistol smith, helped build custom 1911s, took several basic machining tool courses, and he liked work. Then he became a paralegal to pay the bills. Now, 35 years later, he's looking at something he can do when he retires, but he wants the hobby to pay for itself. How does he get that done, and how does he start?
Man, with a business plan.
Yeah.
I could teach a business course. I mean, I've started half a dozen businesses. 4 have been successful, 2 have failed. We don't have enough time in a webinar to go into how it works and that. Yeah. I mean, it's just business. So,
but just a solid business plan.
Start with a good business plan. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
And the other thing I can throw in there is zero debt. Don't get into debt. That'll kill you every time.
Every time.
And we have courses on developing business plans, and we also have webinars that touch on that. So those might help you as well.
As a matter of fact, don't we offer a handful of business classes?
Well, as a matter of fact, we do.
That's what I thought. So
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I would definitely suggest you enroll in a few of those.
Mm-hmm. See, Brian, you got any?
Yeah, there's a bunch of them just popped up. Let's see. Gabriel Marks, does it count against you if, as a machinist, if you look at a different answer to solve the problem?
Repeat that, Brian. I'm sorry.
Does it count against you if, as a machinist, you look at a different answer to solve the problem?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, that's the kind of mindset right there that I'm looking for. You want to use all things to come up with your answer. Absolutely you do. Yep. A machinist is nothing more than a problem solver. That's really what a machinist is. They look at a problem and go, wow, how do I get there? I got to do a little boring. I got to do a little cutting. I got to do a little grinding. I got to do a little facing. I got to do a little, thread work. I've got to do all this. So it's a culmination of all these different facets of the particular job to get the job done. So you got to know how to bore. You got to know how to mill. You got to know how to face. You got to know how to cut threads. You got to know how to do all of that stuff.
I would imagine too, you guys kind of, as you're working, you probably have to think 3 steps ahead. You probably have to know what you might run into. Yeah.
Because you know what, Vanessa, it's all mechanical, right? And so I don't know how familiar you are with mechanical stuff, but what you think is going to work usually don't.
Right.
Or it breaks and, you got to find an alternate way to get there. So, or you don't have the right tool or you don't have the right this. Yeah. So yes, exactly. 3 or 4 steps ahead. Absolutely. Yep.
That's pretty awesome.
And what I do is I have like a sketchbook. I mean, I'll sit and look at a part. Okay, I got to make a firing pin. So I've got the major OD, I got a minor OD. It deals with a taper. It comes to what kind of a point. What am I going to need? Is it 1018? Is it, mild steel? Is it, 400 series stainless? I mean, what kind of material are we using here? The materials, and are we hardening? And what's the Rockwell? And, what's the different process? I got to do a taper. I got to do, there's just all kinds of things. So absolutely 4 or 5 steps ahead at least.
Awesome. Let's see. In terms of CNC CAD CAM software, is there one software that stands out as being user-friendly?
As I mentioned before, I use Fusion 360. I feel it's pretty user-friendly. That's what I use, you know. Master Cam for Cam is pretty good. You know, there's, you know, AutoCAD. I mean, there's a million of these things out there. It's kind of whatever you learn. There's, what is it? There's a million of them. So whatever you kind of learn is kind of whatever you organically grow with. And I would say stick with one platform, learn it, become an expert on it, and grow with it.
Awesome. Brian, I think you should read the one from Mark Allen because I can't pronounce that word.
Building that one?
Yeah.
Building a Pete and Fall?
Build a Pete and Paul airplane. Yeah, it's a
Or Zenith.
It's a parasol. It's a parasol wing. So I believe it's a Clark Y airfoil, and it's an all wood design for the fuselage itself. Pretty cool airplane. It's a very classic airplane. If that same individual to that same individual, I'm building a Ace Junior. Used to be known as a Pober Pixie Ace. And it's a very, very, again, very basic chromoly fuselage and Clark Y wood, you know, wood wing ribs.
So
Clark
the second
airfoil,
half of that, the second half of his questions, do you prefer that one or Zenith? He's looking into that one too.
Well, I'm a classic guy for plans built, so I would say Pete and Paul. Pete and Paul Air Camper. As a matter of fact, I just got back from Oshkosh last week, and you know, I was stopped over and seen a few of my friends over in the workshops, and I got roped back into helping out as I taught, you know, gas welding and gas welding aluminum over there for a number of years. And I just come back and I stopped by and saw a friend of mine, Joe. He's still holding the workshop over there. And we were talking, and one of his instructors come up to me. He goes, "You probably don't remember me." I said, "No, I don't." He goes, "You taught me how to weld back in 2011 or 12 or whatever it was." He says, "I want to thank you." He says, "I've watched your sheet metal forming." He says, "I've learned from you welding, gas welding." He says, and now he's teaching welding. So anyway, long story short, man, I prefer the Pete and Paul Air Camper absolutely every time.
We got another one from James Holt. Realistically, as a small town gunsmith, what kind of work should I start with? And can I start small? And what is the least base of knowledge I need before starting as an armor and moving forward to full on smith?
Wow, that's a dozen questions all in one here. Right? It's a loaded question. So let's break this down, and we're going to kind of move quickly through them because I would start with stuff that you're very, very comfortable doing. If you go back, Kip Carpenter had a couple webinars that were absolutely excellent years ago. Yep. And he talks about, I think it was the starting a gunsmith business or one of those. Go back and look it up.
Yeah, it's on the
Kip. Yep. But Kip talks about don't get in over your head. Start with things that you're very comfortable. So does that mean that if I can only clean a firearm that I'm comfortable doing, is that yes? So then clean firearms until you master, okay, we tear them all apart and we put them in sonic cleaner. And now we do that. Now maybe we can do, you know, we can segue into something else. So no, absolutely start with what you're comfortable with. If you're not comfortable with it, I think Kip said along the same lines is if you're not comfortable, do not try to tell somebody or try to talk your customer into saying, you know, I'm going to experiment with your firearm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I would never be okay with that person.
Yeah, exactly. And as a gunsmith, and you're starting, so going to kind of that question too, Brian, was, you know, starting out. So you don't want to start out on a lie and say, hey, you know what, I can make your firing pin for you, and I've never even touched a machine yet. No.
That's not even just gunsmithing. That's just life.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So, you know, start, but the thing is, you know, when you master a skill, then move on to the next skill and master that skill. And you just keep going down the line until eventually you have all these skills that you have mastered, and I mean truly mastered. Then you can start offering those services to your customers, and only then. What was the rest of part of that question, Brian? Run through it again, because I didn't have a notepad out writing notes. So
I got to dig it because it.
There's a lot of good questions there.
Yeah, let me see here. I lost it. The question and answer box kind of pulled it out of the query, so I got to find it.
Man, we're having some great questions tonight, guys. By the way, I'm glad to hear them. Keep firing.
Okay, what kind of work should I start with?
So stop right there, Brian.
Yeah.
So what you start with is what you're mastered at, right? So again, if that's only cleaning firearms, and I shouldn't say only, but if that's cleaning firearms, that's what you offer. You don't offer cleaning and trigger jobs. You offer cleaning.
And so his next question is, what is the least base of knowledge I need before starting as an armorer?
As an armorer?
Yeah, before moving on to a full-blown gunsmith.
So take all the armorer classes you can, take all the certifications you can. Most manufacturers either do them themselves. I think SIG still does their own. You know, I take the armorer's classes. Again, go back, refer back to Kip's video. If you guys can look it up, maybe post it on there about starting and running a gunsmith video or a business. I would refer him to that.
Yeah,
yes.
He's got at least 2 solid ones. He did
yep.
on our YouTube page. On our YouTube.
Because we just don't have the time to get into that right tonight, to get into all of that. So refer people back to those videos.
Yeah.
So what's the next question, Brian?
That was the end of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope I answered that question, guys. It's a long-winded question. I know we don't have time to dig into every little bit of it. Well, hopefully I gave a kind of a broad overscope of that. And a great question, by the way. Great question.
Christopher Jackson says, I have a degree in drafting and design. Is it true that it's easier to draw than it is to make?
I would, I kind of say that goes hand in hand. If you can draw it, you should be able to manufacture it. It's just to get the skills from drawing it. I learned how to draw on you're going to date me back forever ago. I learned how to draw on a drafting board years ago. The old drafting mechanical arms and all that stuff. In fact, I still have a lot of my tools for drafting sitting here in the shop, and I use them. If you can draft, a lot of times you should be able to machine, because a lot of the same rules and a lot of the same thought processes really spill over. So no, if you can design and you can draw, kudos. So you're already a step ahead of the game.
Awesome. Gabriel says, I have some CAD old school drafting. Would that pose a problem?
He says what now?
You there,
Would that
Mark?
Yeah, I feel like just froze.
The question was, I have some CAD training, but I'm more comfortable old school drafting. Would that pose a problem? That's from Gabriel Marks.
No. Nope. I would take your drafting knowledge and I would apply it and do everything you can to get into CAD, though. Learn CAD. Yep. Because Brian, going back to building an airplane here, I'm actually, like, a lot of my fittings and a lot of my, different little, sheet metal parts and this and that, I draft them in CAD, and then I spit that out on my printer, and then I take it to, I have access to a plasma table as well. So I'll either draw it, post it to a plasma table, or I'll actually just print the shape off in my printer, and I'll glue it to a piece of sheet metal, and I'll cut it off of that, cut it out from there. So
no, I'll tell you, there's something to be said for actually using some kind of software to build that 3D.
Yep.
And when I used to do construction work and all the masonry stuff that I used to do, I used to use SketchUp, and I know that's just a basic program, but I did a lot of problem solving there that then saved me a hell of a lot of time when I was out in the field actually putting things together. So yeah, I 100% agree with that, and I don't even have the experience on CAD, but just from my experience, I could draw it on paper, but once I started actually formulating in a 3-dimensional model, that answered a lot of questions.
Well, you can kind of see what's going to work and what's not going to work.
Absolutely.
It becomes a lot more evident at that point, so.
Awesome. Well, I want to start wrapping things up here, but if anybody has any questions they're holding on to, now is the time to submit them in the Q&A section.
Has it been almost an hour already, guys?
It has. It has been
Oh my
46
goodness.
minutes. But
Feels like it's been 10 minutes.
I know, right? Parker says, should I focus on getting my machining classes done, or should I try and start taking classes for gunsmithing as well? I started taking my machining classes last spring, and I'm hoping to get into gunsmithing.
Do it simultaneously. Do it simultaneously, because you're going to apply what you're going to learn in your gunsmithing classes to your machining and vice versa. Absolutely, do it simultaneously. If you can, you know.
Awesome. And Scott Jordan asked, and I can answer this one, but I graduated from SDI in 2017. Can I just take the course on machining? Absolutely, you can. You can take any course as an individual course, just pay by the credit hour. So you can go to the application and pick the individual course, and you can submit it that way.
I wonder if he has a firearms degree, he should have taken. I thought that was part of the degree.
Was it in 2017?
Yeah, I've been teaching.
It was 2007, I think it said.
Is that what it said?
Yeah.
2007.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't been here that long.
Yeah. But I would just say go to the application. It said 2017, but my recommendation, fill it out for the individual course and talk to your admissions representative about it.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, I hate to say it, you know, I'm a little biased, but I think our machining program here is pretty good at SDI.
Yeah. Great instructor. Great instructor. Yeah. Awesome. What CNC machines do you use?
Anything from horizontal, vertical, and turning centers. I mean, you know, in terms of brands, DMG Mori, Haas, Kearns. I mean, you know, I've used primarily most all of them.
Awesome.
You know, some, you know, yeah, they're just, yeah, the controllers are different. Siemens, Heidenhains, Beta, you know, but I mean, it's just, yeah. So, yep.
Awesome. All right.
Haas is a good little machine.
And Dennis says, I have a machine tool technology diploma. Can I take any course without the machining included at SDI?
I don't know.
I don't either. But
well, you can always take the machining class.
yeah, let's say, but you can go and fill out a thing on our website, sdi.edu, and you can take the machining course.
You bet.
Yeah. With our wonderful instructor, Mark Lynn. I don't know if you know him. He's one of my favorites. Awesome. Well, I think that is all the questions we have. Mark, thank you so much again. And everybody that's here, thank you so much for being on. Brian, thank you, kinda. But thanks everybody for listening and for watching and for participating. And we'll hope to see you next month. And if you want more information on the machining course or on any of our programs, check out sdi.edu.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
And Mark, your Instagram is MAL2516?
That's correct.
All right. And you can check Mark out there.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.